Welcome to the Death Talk podcast. The vision for this podcast is to break the culture of silence surrounding death and dying. I'm your host, Lisa Murray. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Death Talk podcast. This is Lisa. And today I'm really excited to talk about dreams because that's probably one of the most significant things that has always been with me, even before I lost anybody, is very vivid dreams. Dreams of flying, dreams of other worlds, dreams of time travel. I mean, I've had really intense dreams my whole life. And so when the key people in my life died, it didn't surprise me that I also had dreams with them, which to me, in my heart, are visitations. And so I just wanted to say that I was in editing this episode today, I was cringing at how much I was talking. And I'm like, oh my God. But for me, it's like part of my interview style is that I want to pretend in my mind that we're sitting somewhere at a cafe and we're both talking to each other and we're both kind of getting each other excited about the topic, or we're opening up in levels and ways that we didn't think of before. And sometimes if a person is being just interviewed and there's not like stories going back and forth, to me, that's always kind of like, sometimes that's necessary, but sometimes it feels like a missed opportunity because who knows where the story can go if the interviewer is sort of bringing up things that the topic is bringing up inside of them. So I like losing myself in the moment and really connecting with that person that I'm talking to's energy. And also, if I've repeated stories, which I know I have in this podcast, a lot of times it's because I'm talking about it with this new person. And so there's like a new light on it, or that I kind of want to see how they will react to that particular scenario. So I don't know. It's just funny because I was like, I've got to record an intro for this one and explain this whole thing. But I wanted to cut a lot of it out. And then there was just something stopping me. And something was telling me, just leave it in. Because a lot of times the parts that make us uncomfortable are the things that are us being vulnerable. And that's always a good thing to leave in and to share. So I am letting you know there's some parts of this episode that I feel very vulnerable because I'm talking so much. I'm just like, blah, 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 blah. And I really appreciate Dr. Joshua Black being so gracious and awesome and wonderful. But he literally reminds me of one of my cousins. So I felt like I was just like sitting on a patio, drinking iced tea on a hot day, talking to him about all these things. And I even had to break it up into 2 parts again, just like I did with the other recent episode. So this is part 1. And then part 2, we're going to get a lot into more dreams, more specific dreams. And so anyways, I hope you enjoyed this first part. And yeah, just, this is your host, Lisa, talking about her stuff again. All right. Well, thank you. And and I'll see you in at the end, I think. Well, not see, but you're going to hear me. All right. Thanks. I'd like to welcome Dr. Joshua Black, whose research interest is in the area of grief dreams with a specific focus on dreams of the deceased. He is also the co-host of the Grief Dreams podcast, and he offers grief dreams workshops virtually on his website, griefdreams.ca. He's located in Ontario, Canada, but for now he's located in this conversation. Welcome, Dr. Joshua Black.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for having me.
Absolutely. So I'm interested in talking to you because I remembered a lot of my dreams after people had died, whether I was close to them or not. And so your work is really fascinating to me. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved in this and what you're doing with that right now?
Yeah, when I look back at just me being in this field, I don't feel it was, so much by choice. What happened was I was actually in my undergrad and I was wanting to be a high school teacher. So that was my goal, or elementary school teacher, either one. So that's my goal. And then in my 3rd year, my dad died. And it was very sudden and it really destroyed me. And I had a hard time processing it. The best way to put it would be like the color went out of my world. And nothing that I was doing was bringing any life into me. So some of the stuff I would typically do I wasn't feeling anything from doing it. And so I didn't know what to do. And I was still in school, so I continued to work hard in that. But I felt lost in a lot of ways. And it wasn't until 3 months after my dad's death where I had this dream. And I wasn't looking for a dream. I wasn't asking for one. And I didn't even remember anyone even telling me that they had one at any point. So for it to happen to me was very magical, because it wasn't like I was trying to get one kind of thing. And so what it did was completely change me. And that's the mystery of sort of this topic for me, is how much it can change someone. So I'll tell you a little bit about the dream. So I was sleeping in my bed, but the dream was so realistic and so vivid. And I was in my room, and I could see my father looking through some of the clutter in my room at that time. And he really enjoyed clutter. And that was his thing, right? Like, he would always pick stuff up on like the side of the road and all that sort of stuff. So our house was really filled with stuff. And at that time, I kind of adapted that habit, which I've changed, going forward. But at that time, he was looking through some of the stuff, which is just, his personality. And I walked up to him, and he looked so healthy and good. Like, it's hard to explain. The best way is, like, he looked light, because he had so much issues in waking life with alcohol and emotional issues that he couldn't regulate his emotions to the best extent. So, and he always had this heaviness to him. But at that moment, he felt like very light. And I went up to him and I said, I'm going to miss you, acknowledging the loss. And I said, I loved him. And then we hugged, and I woke up. And the craziest thing, when I woke up, everything changed. It wasn't that I interpreted the dream. Like, the dream itself changed me. And I sat at the edge of the bed wondering, what was that? And I still don't fully understand what it was. But that was the saving grace in my grief. Without that, I don't know how long I would have went to that, like, in that space. Could have been for the rest of my life. Like, I don't know. But that dream completely changed me and my grief. But what's crazy is, when I had that dream, I didn't tell anyone about it. And so there's something in me that wanted to keep that a secret, to keep that hidden for, whatever the reason. And I continued to finish school thinking that I was still going to be an elementary school teacher. But what happened was, when I applied and got the interview, something in me just said this wasn't right. And it was my dad's dream, which is interesting. It was my dad's dream for me to have that career. He always, like, almost encouraged me throughout every aspect of my life, because they thought they had great jobs and they had good pensions. And so I just always went towards that goal. But now that he was dead, I think something changed. Maybe I didn't have that pressure, but it also just didn't feel right. And so I declined, not knowing what to do. I then decided to volunteer with the bereaved. And at that time, there wasn't any training in grief dreams or anything like that. But all these people that I was, supporting kept asking about these dreams. And it's not like I shared mine, but for whatever reason, they felt safe enough to ask questions on it or share their own. And so I went to the research to see if there was anything that, that could help them in their questions. Like, was it common? Why am I having these negative dreams? What does this dream mean? And there wasn't anything for them that I could actually use. So at that point, so this was about, 1 year after graduating, I thought maybe I could, answer these questions for them. And so I looked around, like, to see where I could even do this research, because it doesn't seem like it's been done. So it's like, where do you even find a supervisor to look at this stuff? And lo and behold, where I moved to, Trent University, there was a researcher that studies dreams, and that's very rare. And so
Wow.
it was just like, was one of those moments you're like, this is amazing. And so I was able to talk to her, and I hadn't, like, my grades were good enough to be able to get into, and that was amazing. I learned so much about the topic in those first 2 years that I never knew prior. And then I got into my PhD at a different school. And once again, they didn't have a, grief core or a grief program or even a dreams program, to tell you the truth. But the supervisor that I approached was really big into trauma. And she was about to retire soon. And she had this love and passion for dreams throughout her whole life. And so when I talked about this subject, it kind of like, a light bulb went off, and she was excited to do that. And it turned out I was her last student. And we got so much research done within that time and answered a lot of the questions that I really couldn't answer in my master's program just because the program was so short. It's only 2 years. But I got a lot of it done in my PhD. And that definitely then changed really everything moving forward, and people like just validating and understanding the significance of this topic.
Wow. I love that. Yeah, it's such an obvious thing, really. I mean, I can't believe no one's ever done it or talked about it in this way or researched it, I guess, before. So I'm really happy that you went that direction. And I love that you followed that feeling too, because in my other podcast, I talk about people who are pursuing dreams, and that's such an important part of it, is just listen to those little feelings. I have an episode called Follow That Feeling. And that's what I love that. Okay, so you mentioned something when you were talking about your father in your dream, that you mentioned that he wasn't alive. And that got me thinking about some of the dreams that I had. I could mention that, like my first memory of having a dream about somebody was my grandfather after he died when I was 16. First of all, before he died, and I think this is important too, is that they used to come into town every Christmas and Easter. They live north of Chicago. And then I grew up in Arizona, and they would come in town every Christmas and Easter. So and we go to dinner. We'd go out to dinner every night. So we'd go to all these great restaurants. And the last night that they were in town, something told me to sit next to him. And then something told me to ask him every question I've ever wanted to know about him, and to get to know his essence, not just who he was as my grandfather, which, like, I think back now and I think, wow, because I was like 16, but that is literally how it came through me. I remember thinking essence and all that other stuff. So I sat next to him and I asked him a bunch of questions, and it got to the point where my mom said, "Lisa, he doesn't want to be interviewed at dinner." And I was like, well, he's a Sagittarius like me. Yes, he does. And he did. He liked talking about himself. So he discontinued and everything. So then they went back to Chicago, and a couple months later, he had a heart attack and he died. And I didn't dream about him right away. And I was actually really happy when he died. I remember. I felt very happy for him. I did not have this reaction to other deaths, but just looking back. So then about a year after he died, I started having dreams about him. And they're a reoccurring theme. I'd walk into a restaurant and he'd be sitting at a table by the window, and I'd be walking in, and then I'd look back and he'd be gone. Or he'd smile at me, and then I'd look back and he'd be gone. All kinds of dreams like that. And then one time I was in his house, and he walked up to me, and I said, "Grandpere, you're supposed to be dead. What are you doing here?" And he kind of laughed and he messed up my hair and walked away. And so the fact that I mentioned that he was dead was kind of unique, because when I had dreams about Derek, my friend who was killed in 2012, I got the feeling that I should never mention that I should never, once I started thinking about it, even when I was looking at him, because we were speaking like telepathically, when I would just start to think about it, he would start to go away. He would start to disappear. And I knew that I was like, no, 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 no. And I was trying to like hold on to the dream, hold on to the connection. But yeah, so what does your research say about that? Like what are the percentage of people admitting it or talking about it openly in a dream versus it not talked about at all?
Well, it's an interesting question. I haven't really looked at that specifically, well, I probably could, but I have the data. But it's interesting to sort of hear that the two differences of talking or acknowledging that the person's dead and not, or having caution to acknowledging it. And there's some dreams that I've heard where someone acknowledges the death, and the person, so the deceased, gets almost very anxious, like they didn't know, and they become like scared or they panic themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's other times where you tell them and they just make up an excuse on why they're back, to almost like calm the mind down. So like one of the themes that I have seen like is that, and so they'll say like, you'll say, "Oh, you're not supposed to be here, you're dead." And then the person will say, "I was, but I just didn't like it very much, so I came back." Or another one would be like, "Oh, like I'm actually not dead. I'm a part of the CIA." and I never actually really died. I'm just in this foreign land.
Oh no, that would stress me out. I would not want to hear that.
And then there's, people who are who lost a spouse. They may have a dream where the individual's not dead, but they're cheating on them instead. So it's very interesting to sort of see what the mind is, or what these dreams are doing, because it really relates to our waking life grief. And a lot of times it is about processing that reality. And you said that the deaths were kind of different between the two. And so there's probably something to do with that more than if you believe, let's say it was a visitation, than to do with the actual soul, quote unquote. So yeah, it's definitely very interesting. You notice that in your own dreams.
Well, and the other thing I notice is that if the person I'm dreaming about is talking using their mouth, then usually it's a dream. But if I think back when I wake up and they didn't ever use their mouth and we just talked with our minds, then to me that felt like a visitation.
Oh.
And I've asked other people about this, and they've said, "Yeah, you're right. I never saw their mouth moved. We were just communicating." So I don't know. There's something about that too, because I do think you probably dream about, just like you would dream about people who are alive in your life. Your brain is processing different events and different things. So I don't think every dream is a visitation, but the visitation dreams, they stand out, and I remember them. Like, it's very clear. It feels different when I wake up. I feel like I just spent time with them. And that's a really good feeling when you really love the person and you miss them. It's a great feeling.
It's so true to have that kind of emotion. You're right. Some dreams are different, has a different feeling than other dreams. But like it's interesting just when we call, like someone who's spiritual calls a dream a visitation, they're so different, right? Like no one has the same idea, and it's very individual on what that looks like to people. So, some people, even the ones where they're in the background, they'll still say it is, because, it gives them comfort. And that's, that's great. Like, I'm not going to faux pas that at all. It's just like you sit with them in that beauty of being able to sort of see their loved one again. But other times, even negative dreams, people will take as hauntings. And so that would be like a negative visitation kind of dream. And, there's a lot of different ways we can look at that. And like even cultures have different viewpoints on these dreams. And so it's very difficult for me as a listener to know when one is or one isn't, quote unquote, in someone's mind. And so I always have to ask people. So for you, given that you have some sort of spirituality, how do you see that dream?
Yeah. And that's great. And I think that you're right. No one can know, unless it's you. Like, you couldn't ever convince anyone that you really felt like you saw your father. You just know that for yourself. And that's really, I guess, all that matters. And also, even if it is just your mind, it doesn't matter, because it's what helps you. And I've embraced that as well. I've thought there's a possibility that was not a visitation, that it was my mind. I don't believe that, but I understand from a information point of view that that's a possibility. And even if that were true, I'd be willing to take that reality, just because I was so distraught, especially after my friend Derek was killed. I was so distraught that anything that could help me, because really nothing could, I needed that. So whatever that was, I was going to take it.
Yeah. And it's there's so much mystery in these dreams. That's why I can't even say either way. I don't know, there's a lot of, I don't know, I've seen a lot of dreams that make you question reality. It's the best way to put it. And you're right, these dreams are different. My research shows that these dreams are definitely different than normal dreams for the most part. And how do you understand that? And that's where more research needs to be done. But you're right, like, what's interesting about dreams, let's talk about dreams in general to get a better understanding. So most dreams, on average, people have are negative in nature. And that's
really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. So that's really reflective of just our really everyday waking life. Like, we're not very happy for the most part. There's a lot of stress we're dealing with, and either we're avoiding or we're just trying to figure out how to process. And, your dreams really reflect our waking life. And you see that even after trauma, your dreams are even more frequently negative. And so after grief, you would think your dreams would be also frequently negative. And if the deceased is in it, they'd probably be even more negative, because that's definitely reflecting a loss in what's going on in your life. But what's strange is that for the most part, most people who dream of the deceased, it will probably be positive in nature. So a lot of the data, so I've had data with spousal loss, pet loss, and even, miscarriages. And for the most part, it's positive. And there are negative dreams that are also common. But what's interesting is if you have a negative dream, you're also more likely to have a positive dream. And so what the theory is that you're probably having these negative dreams in the beginning, and they're probably related more to maybe trauma or unresolved feelings of guilt or blame. And then as you work through that, then they turn to something more positive in nature. And as you move forward in life, these dreams will then change in what they're trying to do. So in loss, right, in the moments of grief, they're going to help you with your grief, those positive ones in some way. As you move forward in life, let's say you work through some of the grief, it's going to help you with other stuff that's not about the loss per se. So maybe it's a relationship or financial stress, something like that. Maybe it's the pandemic. I've seen those dreams too. And then at end of life, they change again to helping you transition from and calm your spirits as you die. So it's very interesting why they change over time, but also why they're not as frequent either. So like you look at it, if it's such a positive thing, if the mind's doing such a thing, why don't we get it all the time? Because I would love to get these positive dreams every time I'm stressed, to give me wisdom or to make me feel loved when I'm having difficulties doing that myself. But it doesn't happen. And so it's very, just the timing of these dreams, it's, I kind of call it, it's kind of magical in nature because you can't force them. And when they happen, they tend to be very powerful.
That's a really good point. Cause, yeah, I mean, there's other times where I think, why aren't I dreaming about them now? But yeah, that's true. It did happen in a timely way. Well, I want to explain a little bit what happened with Derek, and I'm going to run some dreams by you. Is that okay? Because I want to know your take on it.
Sure.
Okay. You're turning into my therapist right now. You're like, I'm not that kind of a doctor. I'm like, whatever you are. Okay. So when I was in my early 20s, I actually dated Derek for like 10 or 11 years. And so we were together for, good chunk of time. And during that time, I said, whoever dies first should let the other person know that there's an afterlife. And he would laugh. He had a really light, fun spirit. And he laughed. And I said, why are you laughing? And he's like, well, what makes you think I'm going to die first? And I said, I don't. I just want whoever dies first, just because we were really interested in stuff like that. So I was like, let's just make a pact right now while either of us, we're not going to die, but like, let's just say that. He's like, okay. So I kind of forgot that I even said that for the most part, just moved on with life. And then we actually broke up but stayed friends. We stayed close. And I just always felt like a real spiritual closeness with him that, just because our relationship didn't work doesn't mean we didn't still care about each other and want each other to be happy. So fast forward, he ended up getting into a very abusive relationship, and there's a lot of questions around his death, but his death was actually kind of traumatic. It was run over by a train, and it was during the day, and he was meeting a friend, and there's a lot of weird circumstances about it. But so right after he died, I would feel this buzzing around me, and I didn't know what it was. And I don't even like just like when I said when I was 16 and I said, get to know my grandfather's essence, that's literally how it came through then. And the buzzing is literally what it was then. And you would think I'd be more freaked out, but I was afraid of it because it scared me, but I didn't know it was him. I didn't even think about it. I just thought, actually what I thought was because I was so grief stricken that a negative energy was coming into my area for some reason. And so I would kind of tighten up my muscles and say in my head, like, go away. And so I didn't dream about him right away. There was a lot of that kind of going on. There were a lot of questions around his death, talking to a lot of his family, trying to just figure out what was happening. He didn't tell a lot of people he didn't tell anybody but me about the physical abuse from this person. And he was embarrassed. And so I told him, please tell somebody else. And I was trying to get him to leave the city and stuff. So a lot of it was like, okay, let me just reconnect with his family and try to find out who knows what, you know, because I wasn't sure if they even knew what was going on. But his mom and his brother knew, thank God. So so let's see, fast forward to when I was in town for the funeral. And then I was staying with a friend, and his cousin is psychic. And she called him and she said, "You have a friend staying there who lost somebody." And he said, "Yeah." And she said, "Tell her that he's trying to keep his promise to her, but she keeps pushing him away." And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even tell anybody about that. And she described my room. She described a whole nother thing with row your boat, like some other kind of thing that we had in common that no one knew. It was just between me and him. And so with my dreams, so we were already like, when we were together, when we were friends, we always talked about, like, he wanted to do space travel and I didn't. I said, I have no desire ever to be on another planet. And he thought that was hilarious. He's like, why? And I was like, I don't care. I want to be on Earth and that's it. And so I started having these really intense, like, time travel space type dreams that felt completely real, not even in my wheelhouse at all, with him. And we would just end up in all these, and he was very excited. And I feel like he was trying to show me like something. And I was like, this is weird. And it was very fast. And we'd go from one place to the other. And I remember I was in one place and it felt like probably like early 80s or something. And there were these pay phones, and I was trying to figure out how to contact somebody while I was in the dream to let them know I'm like time traveling. But anyways, so fast forward to that. And then there were other dreams where he'd be working like in the woods, and he'd have a clipboard, and he couldn't really talk to me. That's the thing. In all the dreams, he would kind of say stuff to me, but he couldn't. It's almost like if he actually started talking to me, that put the timer on the dream. Oh. And so he would just look at me and he would kind of communicate some stuff. And then the rest of it was I was supposed to guess, I think. And if I asked anything, or if I started going, like, if I started getting like, well, what's happened? Like, what happened? Why did all this happen? It would, like, he would start to disappear. Or if I, like I said, if I acknowledged that he had died in any way, that was the thing that would make him kind of go away. He'd act like he was in a hurry. He had to go somewhere. That was at least 5 dreams with him with that. And then he died in August of 2012. And then my brother died unexpectedly in February of 2014. And I don't remember how long it was before my brother died, but I feel like it was within weeks. I had a dream where Derek was looking at me, and he looked at me like he knew something was coming and that it was going to upset me. And it was the only dream I had with him where I felt uncomfortable, and I felt like it was quote unquote negative. It wasn't negative because it was him, but I mean, you know what I mean? Like, where there was a negative feeling when I woke up, like he looked worried about me, like, something's going to happen. You're not going to be good about it. And when I woke up, I thought, God, I don't want to have those kind of dreams about him. I prefer the other ones. I don't ever want to have a dream like that. And then when my brother died, I thought about that. I thought that's what he was showing. That's what he was trying to prep me on. Maybe it's like they're not, I don't know if I'm getting into some other area, but if there's an afterlife and if there's some rules over there that they're not supposed to, like, tell us certain things. He was just trying to use like his eyes and like codes, like something's coming, because he knew my brother was really important to me. And we had a really good relationship. And I think he just knew that, so I think that's kind of weird. You can't really explain that, like, in terms of it being a stress dream, but maybe I gave it that meaning later. But I mean, no other dream about him was ever like that. No other dream was there anything like that? So
if we want to pause there. So
yeah. Sorry, go ahead. I go deep into it. I'm like down the river, but okay, go ahead.
You had a lot of dreams so far. So like each one has its own talking points. But the last one about, your brother or your Derek giving you the eyes and then something happens. It's very interesting because I have come to, on my podcast and also just collecting dreams from other people. When I went in, I was just looking for dreams like of the deceased. So in my understanding is, they're dead kind of thing. What I started finding was some people had dreams before they even knew the individual died, which is so bizarre to me, because how are you having a dream that's very similar to a dream someone would have in knowing that they were died, but they have never been informed yet. So they've actually died, you just haven't been informed yet. And the dreams are very similar. And like, how do you make sense of that? And then you go even further, and some people will have these precog dreams, and a couple people on my podcast for that too, where they talk about this, either they have a dream of a knowing that something's going to happen to a person, but they don't give the specific details, so you can't really stop it per se. And it's more like it's preparing you for what's to come. And then that's interesting in itself, because then you're like, why? Like, why was that important for me to remember or even just have? Because I couldn't have saved them anyways, right? Like, so what is it all about? And it goes back to sort of, there's a lot of mystery to this and about sitting with what is actually occurring around us. And I think there's power in that. There's really a lot of power in sitting with not knowing everything about life, but understanding that it's okay to sit in the unknown. But it's so difficult, like we always want to place a reason on something, and a lot of times when it comes to precog dreams in general, people want to say, oh, I should have, or I could have stopped it, or something like that, rather than saying, how is this even possible? Like, doesn't make any sense. And like some of the dreams that people have are like the person died in the exact way that they foresaw. And you're just like, what is going on here? And you just surrender to the knowledge that, you just don't know. And there's almost, if you can get there, I feel like there's got to be some beneficial nature of you knowing that or having that. Because most people around you wouldn't believe you. They'll put it on something else. But you yourself had this experience and knew it was significant. It was different from your other dreams. So it really points to the fact that there was something in you that knew. And that is, for me, the most beautiful part of it. And I sit with people when they say that, because I understand that there probably was. And so, yes, you're not crazy. Like, this has actually been going on. And you can see it in a lot of religions, these precognitive dreams. So it's not like, a lot of people just don't talk about it because we don't understand how it's possible, right? So we can't study it in really any real way. So we're just left with just sitting with the unknown of it all.
I'm so glad you said that, just sitting with the unknown, because I think that was a huge part of my grief journey, was embracing that, because, I like to figure things out. I like to have answers. And when it comes to death, there is no answer to be had while we're alive. Maybe when we die, things will make sense. But at the end of the day, I don't really think they do. And it will while we're alive. It could come close to it, but you're still just guessing. So when I really embrace just sitting with not knowing, not only does it open up more possibilities, but it also just makes it not about the other stuff. It's not about solving anything. So I love that you brought that up.
Well, it goes back too to what you're talking about with Derek, wanting to know these answers. And in a way, you could say that experience of sitting in the unknown of how you could have a precog dream, in a way, actually relates to sitting with the mystery of how he died in its own, teaching of wisdom, because those two are intertwined about sitting in the mystery and not needing to know the answers.
Yeah, absolutely. I was pretty distraught after Derek died. I mean, I think about it, the further I get away from it, the more I think about it, the more I think like that wasn't just, I've lost people before him. I've lost people after him. It was different and I think a lot of it had to do with the circumstances of his death and all of that, but it also just was a soul connection or something. And it was really something I did not expect at all. And, so I think that something like, having him kind of come and be concerned about me before my brother died was very on point, because I didn't want to live for a couple of years. It was pretty sketchy there for a while. I mean, when my brother died too, it was just like, it was dark. And, so I look at that and I think that's the only thing sometimes that got me through it, was thinking, if he knew it, then maybe there is some other kind of plan, and maybe I just need to calm down. And even though I'm in a lot of pain, there's something else going on and I just have to keep going. Because otherwise, if I were meant to be dead, I'd be dead. But I'm alive. I'm here. So I've got to some days just get up and brush my teeth, if even that. And, and then after that, I've gone on to do a lot of things. But during those first couple of years, it was very, very hard to do anything. So I just want to make sure that's put out there because, I think once we heal, we kind of skim over stuff. But it really was like a death for me for like a couple of years and definitely a big change in my personality. So I'm glad that he came into that dream and kind of, even if it was my mind, because I needed that. I needed to have him look at me like concerned because he knows me and he loves me and he would know that something like that would throw me all the way down.
Hey, like what I see is you're just developing and continuing the bond with him, which sort of my research has shown that, certain dreams with the deceased definitely do that. And when you look at those bonds, those are actually very helpful in the grieving process. So, like whatever you take it for, if you felt it was a visitation, then cool, it was. And let's work with that and to feel that love still, because you're right. It's about how do you move forward each day? And if those dreams can help you feel loved, feel that there's more purpose to life in your life, then why not, right? Like there's a lot we don't know. And so why not envision what's most helpful or what can inspire us to be the best self that we can be. And I think that when we look at it, like because it really goes to then what's the purpose of life, right? If there's this afterlife, what's the purpose of this? Like it really makes you start thinking about what is life about? Is it about, making money, having a job, having kids? Like is that what it is? Like, is that, does that make sense to then how the afterlife works and everything? And so, it's a beautiful thing to try to think about. And when I think about that myself, I look at these dreams as a way to really gain insight into maybe what are the mysteries of life, and mind or not, I think they're both telling the same thing, which is, how can you rethink your life in this moment? And for me, it's been changing, but for the most part now, it's really about, can we love ourselves? And that's been such a difficult task for me over the years. But these dreams, man, the amount of love that's in these dreams and the feeling people get in these dreams is, I would say, different than people have ever felt in waking life. And for me, that's where like a lot of mystery too lies. It's like, how can we feel something in our dreams that we've never felt in waking life? Like this cloud of love. People say like it's a cloud of love, or this almost like wave of love that they just can't explain, but yet it's there. And, when I look at that, I'm like, wow, if it's there in your dream, why can't it be there in waking life? And so what's blocking that? Like, what are the things in our minds that's holding that back? And so like, I've constantly been working on it. And I feel that a lot of the answers is just like how we view ourselves, how we look at ourselves, our past traumas, our models. And when we start working at that, the love that we can feel actually changes. So like, that's almost like the goal for me is to, how much can I love before I die? Like, how much can I feel love before I die about myself? And with that allows you to feel love for others even more.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah, I do think, even if you study people who've had near-death experiences, they say that's a lot of what they come back knowing, that it's about love, loving people, loving each other, and learning from people and growing. And
I will say too, your other dream with Derek, and you mentioned how they tend to end quickly. And I will say most of these dreams do end quickly, even if you acknowledge that the person's dead or not. So that's actually a common thing, that these dreams just end quickly. And that in itself is its own mystery. And there's got to be some reason or benefit for that. Because I think most people, if given the choice, would want to spend the entire night just dreaming of that person and being in that dream with that person. But for whatever reason, they're quick. And what they say is quick before they either vanish, the person wakes up, or the person has to leave, either one, depending on where they are. And you're like, oh, it's different. So if it's different, it means that there must be a reason for it. And I think, just for our grief, I think that's really part of what we're trying to deal with is like, you're not trying to get attached to the person. You're trying to like still continue that relationship or that bond, but also understand that there is this separation that is now present. And for a lot of times too, in the dreams, like I got to hug my dad, which was great, but some people can't even do that. There's like a barrier between the two. And it's very symbolic of, how you have to develop this relationship now that the person's body is dead. Where you're like, how do you think about the person now? How do you work through this relationship given you can't physically touch them?
Yeah, I was a little bit jealous when you said you got to hug your dad. I was like, I would love that. There is definitely that barrier. Although I did have one dream after my brother died, and this gets into another one of your topics, which is people who don't dream and then people who do dream.
Mhm.
But I always remembered my dream, and I saw that was part of your research too. I've always had very intense dreams since I was a little kid. So my mom has not remembered her dreams, I think, ever, like rarely. And so, she's been very sad that she doesn't have any dreams with my brother. And one of the dreams I had, she was never there with us, which is why it's weird. But when I was growing up, my parents divorced, and my dad would always get this beach house in San Diego, and my brother loved going there. And there's like a boardwalk, and we were standing on the board. Me and my mom were standing on the boardwalk, and my brother walked up to us from the sand. So there's like a little wall in between us. And he was walking up to us, and he was probably around maybe, I don't know, 13, 14 years old, maybe a little bit younger. And he looked totally happy. Like I could see that being like the best time of his life, like when he was the happiest. And and my mom was pretending to see him because he was walking up towards us. And I said, "Oh my God, here comes Michael." And she was like looking straight out to the ocean. And she was like, "Oh yeah." And I looked at her and I thought, she's not even looking at him. She can't see him. Mm-hmm. And so when he got up to us, I held his arm, and that I do remember. I do remember touching his arm. And I said, I basically said, "She can't see you. Can she touch you?" And he said, "Yes." And so I said, "Mom, reach your other arm out, reach it out in front of you." And so she was kind of moving it around. And as soon as she like locked on to where his arm was, she saw him and she started crying, and I woke up. And so that one was cool because it did involve touch being an important part, but I don't really remember like feeling like I was hugging him or touching him. I just knew that was part of what needed to happen to ground it enough for my mom or something like that.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting what happens in these moments. And you may have had many dreams of hugging your brother, but just not remembered it. It wasn't the, I guess, most important thing at that time for you. I think that's the very interesting thing about these dreams, because I looked at the question of why are some people having these dreams and other people aren't. And what I found is that it's not based on your attachment or personality or grief for the, spirituality, like for the most part. What the biggest predictor is, and really there's only been one major predictor, and that would be your dream recall in general. So the more you remember your dreams, the more likely you're going to catch one of these types of dreams. So to me, it says that probably people are dreaming of the deceased more than they're actually remembering it. Mm-hmm. And that's in its own mystery on why are we remembering some dreams over others. But the other thing too is, and you sort of see that, like, because some people thought if you're dreaming of the deceased, it means maybe that your grief is more severe. And so I looked at that question, and it doesn't seem to be the case, because there wasn't any direct predictor to dreaming of the deceased through grief. But there's an indirect predictor, which says that to sleep in general, like waking up and having more dreams in general. And so what that shows me is a lot of people in grief tend to have insomnia, and they'll tend to wake up more often. And it's because you're waking up more often, you're having more opportunity to remember a dream. And so then you're more likely to remember one of those types of dreams. So like it's not grief per se. It's just that you're just having more opportunity to remember dreams. And there's different ways people can influence their dream recall, which is really nice. So it's not like you're stuck with what you have. And so the best way to do that is to value dreams, which a lot of people, honestly, in our culture, they just don't value dreams. Like, you're never really taught about them, and you don't really understand their purpose. But when you start thinking about them more, you start writing them down if you have one, research has found that you'll start increasing the amount of dreams you remember. And so really you're training yourself to basically say, these are important now. I want to remember these. And it's always a caveat to say that if you are grieving and you start remembering your dreams, you're probably going to have more negative dreams in general, but maybe you'll catch one of these dreams and it's positive, right? So that's sort of the thing. But it's also good to know that 10% of the population just doesn't remember dreaming in general. So there will be a few people out there that have never remembered a dream. And doing that exercise may not work because they're not having anything in their life to jot down. And it's just part of your chemistry and who you are.
Yes, absolutely. And I always had really intense dreams, but when I was around 20, I started having like these night terrors that came out of the blue and were very violent and horrible. And so it went on for a while, and I was going to school and working full time both, and I was just losing it. So I made a deal with my subconscious, and I said, if you can tone it down a little bit, I'll learn about dream analysis and we'll kind of work with each other. Cause I kind of felt like this feral part of myself that was trying to communicate to me, but only knew how to be very drastic to get my attention. So I started studying like Carl Jung and different styles of, archetypes and different things about dreams. And I would write down my dreams. When I woke up, I would think about what I remembered, even if it was just sketches and flashes, and I would write that down, and it did calm down. And so I really use my dreams as like a gauge of how I'm doing or processing things. I'll go through periods of time where I'm not dreaming very much just because either I'm not sleeping well or there's not a lot going on, or maybe I don't want to process anything. Maybe I just want to break from all kinds of things. Right. But I used to have a lot of flying dreams, and in the flying dreams, I could always tell the health of my psychological and spiritual health based on how I flew. And sometimes I would fly and go straight up into the sky, and I'd go too fast and too far, and I'd go all the way into space. And we've already established the fact that I'm not interested in that. So it kind of scares me because you lose your perspective. You're so high up, you can't even, it's pretty, but it's also kind of scary because you don't know where you are. And then I've had other dreams where I fly really fast, but only like 4 feet off the ground. And I can't stand those dreams. But yeah, I always tell people that too. I say, just start a journal and start thinking about your dreams before you go to bed, and then when you wake up, allow yourself to just sit there and think about what you dreamt about. And people are so quick to push the dream away too. I think they probably do remember it, but they're not making that mental conscious connection when they get up. This concludes part 1 of my interview with Dr. Joshua Black. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week will be part 2. If you would like to learn more about Dr. Joshua Black and what he does, go to his website, check out his podcast. All of those tidbits of information will be in the show notes on deathtalkpodcast.com. And this is episode number 15. Thanks for listening.